Hey friend, how are you today?
This world were mine.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, my name's Taurus and I'm a professional performer currently living in Dallas. This time I wanted to do something a little bit different. It's been a long time since I sat down and talked to y'all. So in honor of Pride Month, I wanted to tell y'all my coming out story. This story has been one I have been hiding from because it's a little more difficult for me to tell. And in some ways, it's still kind of ongoing. But let's dive into it, I guess. So first, I feel like you need a little bit more backstory and you need to know a little bit about me. And I grew up out here in Texas in what used to be a small town, but Mansfield is not much of a small town anymore. And I grew up in a very religious family, and we went to church all the time. All of my extracurricular activities were through church, so that's just kind of where I was all the time. Three or 4 nights out of the week, to be honest. We were always up there, but it was fun. I enjoyed myself. That's where my friends were. That was the life I knew. So I was involved in a mime team, and that's actually where I fell in love with the art of performing. If you don't know anything about a mime team, it's of course the art of pantomime, where you paint your face and you're kind of portraying the emotion behind a song. And in this particular instance, these particular instances, they're gospel songs. And I was part of a team, and we would travel and perform at different churches. We would perform at my home church all the time. It was really fun. And that's kind of where I learned to connect with the emotions inside of me. So, with that being said, I had a friend on the team, and he and I would confide into each other a lot. And we ended up coming out to each other. And this was when I was in 5th grade. We ended up telling each other, came out to each other, essentially. And it was real cool. It was honestly a very sweet moment. And his sister was dating the coach of our team. And so he and the coach of our team were very close. They would he would give him rides to practice all the time. So one day, after me and my friend had came out to each other, my friend came to me and he was like, "Hey, I told our coach about me, or about him." And he was like, "I got a really good response. He didn't yell, or he wasn't angry or anything. He just kind of told me what he thought about it, and then we moved on." And so then I was like, "Oh, cool. I can say something to him and I'll be okay. It won't be that major. It won't be that big of a deal." And I did. I ended up, after practice one evening, I went to talk to him, and I ended up telling him that I was gay. And he was like, "Oh, okay." Seemed like an okay moment. He just kind of took it in, and he was like, "Okay, well, thanks for telling me," I guess. That was kind of the vibe of what it was. And I didn't really think too much of it because my friend had a good experience. So I was like, "Oh, we're good, we're fine. It's great gravy." Fast forward a week, 2 weeks later, I don't remember exactly, but it wasn't much later. My coach calls me and he was like, "Hey, I've been working on a solo piece, and I'm really considering you for it, and I really want you to do it." And I was like, "Oh, great. That's so cool, because that was great. He never had picked me for that before." So he was like, "I am going to come pick you up, and then we're going to have practice, and we're going to go over what we're going to do." And I was like, "Oh, cool, great. That's wonderful. I'm so excited." And I was like, "Let me just go tell my parents real quick so that they know that you're coming to pick me up." And he was like, "No, you don't got to tell them. I've already talked to them. I already talked to them about it, and they're cool. They know." And I was like, "Oh, sweet. That's great." And he comes over to my house to pick me up. I grab my little practice bag with all of my little like dance stuff in it, and I was so excited. I come out to the car, and we hop in the car, and we're driving to the church where we practice at, and I'm just yapping, I'm just talking, whatever, everything's normal. And then we turn onto the street where the church is at, and that street is very, very long. It's very, very long, and somehow it felt much longer that day. But we turn onto that street, and he turns the music down, and he was like, "Hey, I have to tell you something." And I was like, "Okay." And he goes, "We're not actually going to practice. What you told me the other day, I had to tell your parents about it. And we had a meeting, and they wanted me to come get you." And when I tell you, my heart hit the ground. That was crazy. Oh, that's crazy. But I was like, okay. Okay, because I'm not really what am I supposed to do? And so he pulls me up to the front of the church. I get out of the car, and he was like, "Okay, see ya," and literally drives off. Okay. So I go into the church, and I go back to where the pastor's office was, and I walk in, and my parents were sitting there, and they were crying, and my pastor was just sitting at his desk. And my parents immediately get up, and they hugged me, and they were like, "We love you no matter what." And I was like, oh, well, this is great, things are going great. And I started crying, they're crying, everybody's crying. And I was like, oh, cool. And they were like, yeah, we love you. And then my pastor was like, everybody sit down. Okay, so I sat down, and mind you, I was crying. Also in 5th grade, let's keep that in mind. And I look over at him, the pastor, and he was like, "We're gonna help you, don't worry about it." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he just slides over to me this pamphlet. And I just remember that it was green and black. And as I flip through it, he begins to tell me that is a therapist, counselor that will talk to me and help me work through these feelings that I have. And I don't even know, make me feel better or make me not feel the way that I'm feeling. And I stopped crying, of course. And I was looking at it, and I remember there being a big picture on the front of it. And it was a picture of this girl. And it was a box where, it had this picture. It was a side-by-side comparison picture. And it had this girl on it. And then in the comparison picture, it was this boy. And it said on there that their conversion therapies changed this boy from thinking that he was a girl back into being a boy. So essentially, you took this trans woman and made her back into a man, I guess. I don't know. I don't even remember how I felt at that moment. I don't think I really felt much of anything, but I didn't really know what I was supposed to say or what I was supposed to do. I was just okay, everyone around me is telling me that this is what I need to do, so okay, I'll give it a shot, I guess. And a couple days later, I got in the car with my mom and she drove me to this counselor man. I don't even know. I don't know what to call it, but she drove me there and we had to sit in this big waiting room, and around the waiting room was all these pictures of all these people that were like converted or changed or different. And then they finally called me in there, and it was my first one, so my mom had to stay in the room with me, and I was like 12. How old are you in 5th grade? Like 11? And we sat there in that meeting, and he pulls out the picture of that girl that was on his pamphlet, and he starts to tell me his story and how he had changed that boy from believing this and believing that. And I was like, this is crazy. I don't know. I remember like wanting to do my best, like wanting to understand and want that change for myself, because that's what I believe to be, that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And so I was really listening to him, and he was going on, and his big thing was that it's all in your head, essentially, and you can train your brain to believe different things. And sexuality is based off the things that you allow your brain to believe. And so his example that he used was a lamp. And he said that if I trained my brain to like lamps, that eventually I would be aroused by lamps. And how I would train my brain to do that would be to masturbate. So if I masturbated to lamps all the time, then eventually when I see a lamp, I would get turned on by a lamp. So in order to no longer have attraction to men, I just needed to masturbate to women. Cured. I would be instantly cured. And I remember looking over to my mother, and she would not look at me. She was just looking forward. She honestly wasn't even looking at him. She was just looking forward. And I was like, wow, like, this is crazy. Like, this is where you brought me, to this man who just told me to masturbate to lamps. And we had a whole session with him. I have no idea how long it was, but it felt like I was in there forever, of this man just yapping. This real slick looking white man with a like slick over haircut and a very cheap suit. And this is where everybody sent me. This is where the church sent me. This is where my parents took me. I was honestly just kind of appalled. But we go and we get back in the car and we talked about it. She was like, how do you feel? And I was like, I don't really want to go back in there. But she told me that this was supposed to help me. So I ended up going to see that therapist, counselor, whatever you want to call him, like 3 or 4 times. And then one day, I just stopped going. And some time went by, and we just didn't talk about it. We just never brought it back up. But when I go back to church, I was no longer allowed to participate in the mime team. I had to be pulled back. And I was told that I wasn't allowed to do that while I had these feelings, because I was sending off wrong messages or putting out the wrong image, I guess. But eventually, even that changed because I guess I had started to censor myself to where, I don't know, I was just doing what I thought was right. And I was trying really hard to not be gay. So whatever I could think of, I was doing it. I was praying hard, thinking hard, trying to remember what that counselor man told me. Just not good advice, by the way. Anyway, some time went by. They eventually let me start dancing on the mime team again. And then, as one does, I don't even remember what triggered it, but like, I think my parents found, no, they had looked at my phone and I had pictures of boys on my phone. Not all of them were even bad. Like, some of them, I just liked the guy's hair or a guy who didn't have a shirt on, you know? And that caused a whole nother eruption of, are you gay? Do you feel like this? Like, why do you feel like, and a bunch of like, feeling like I was being jumped on. And of course that re-triggered everything. And now I got enrolled in another counselor therapy session, but this time it was a woman. This white lady with a little bob. She kind of looked like Amy Poehler, if you know who that is. But her philosophy didn't really make sense either. Honestly, nobody's did. But her philosophy was basically to pray it away. And I remember this time was different because the way that the pastor would react to me was different whenever I would go back to church. The things that woman was saying to me, she was kind of a blur. I honestly didn't go to her counseling very long. But I remember I would be at church and I would get weird looks from the pastor sometimes. Or there was one time where I was playing with all of the other kids and everybody was just playing, having a good time. And he had came up and he was wearing Converse and he had taken off his shoe and just smacked me in the back of the head. Like, he had just came up out of nowhere and just hit me in the back of the head with his shoe. And I stopped. Honestly, everybody stopped. And there was just like this deafening silence in the room, but it was nothing but kids in there. And we all just kind of looked around and I just walked out. And I just went and I walked and I found my parents and we went home. And I later told them what happened and they were like, wow. Basically like, that's crazy. And nothing really happened. Nothing really came of that. But I guess some more time goes by, and this whole time they were like pulling me in and out of things that I enjoyed, because every time they would see things that they felt like were gay or not of God, then I was getting pulled out of the things that I enjoyed because I was sending the wrong messages, or they didn't want certain people to look at me, or I was reminded that people would treat me differently if I was gay, or like people wouldn't want to be around me, or nobody would want to talk to me. So whenever we would have those talks, I would try, I would try to be something different. And then in high school, I made it all the way through high school, and I never dated anybody. I never dated anybody because I had so much happening. And I've always been myself. I've always lived out loud. And I don't know, I guess I've never really tried to hide, but I've never really tried to put it on blast either. I was just being me. Just always trying to be me. I don't know. And I feel like plenty of people around me knew, and I know that my like cousins or aunts would have different conversations and ask my parents things, and I know that I had friends where they would like ask different things, and I don't know. I never would put things on blast. I would just keep to myself in the best way that I could. But I've always been very social. I don't know. It's odd. It's weird. Anyway, what I'm trying to get to is when I got into college, my freshman year of college, I was talking to this boy, and one day we were at the mall, and I was letting this young man drive my car. And as we're driving, my mom drives right past me. And I was like, dang it. Because not only was I with this boy, but he was driving my car. And that was not supposed to be happening. So of course she whips around. I made him park quickly. She comes swinging around. And now I'm in trouble because I was letting this boy drive my car. And also, she had heard me say his name before, and she told me in the past to stop talking to him. And I clearly did not. And now, he's driving my car. So I had to go home. I had to take him home. I had to go home. And we had a great talk at the house. Wonderful talk. A lot of things were taken away from me. And I was then re-enrolled into therapy, a different one. But this time it was a black man. He was bald, and his office was in, like, my neighborhood was right here, and you would drive out of the neighborhood, down the street, up a little bit, and his office was right here. So it was not that far. And I was enrolled at a community college at the time when I started going to him. And I would have to go see him every single week. And every week he would ask me, why do you think you're here? I'm like, you know why I'm here. And we would talk. And we would talk. But his approach was different. He was like a regular therapist. And we would talk about a lot of the things that were going on in my life. And then we would loop it back to the game. His was like the least aggressive approach. And at some days, I didn't even feel like I was at like a conversion therapy. Definitely wasn't like the first man. But I started going to him when I was a freshman, and then I ended up going to university. But I really wanted to go to university far. I wanted to go out of state, but they wouldn't let me do that. Them being my parents, wouldn't let me do that. So I ended up going to school locally in Fort Worth, and my parents moved to Fort Worth. So they were very close to me. And the therapist was also in Fort Worth, so I was still going to see him once a week all the way through my sophomore year of college. And then it got to the point where I was like, I'm gonna start hijacking these therapy sessions because I have real things going on in my life. And as I got to college, I started to understand that the things that I was feeling in my sexuality weren't wrong. And I was beginning to like meet other people and see and experience other people's stories. Oh. I was beginning to meet other people, and I was getting to see and experience other people's stories, and I got to meet families who didn't treat their gay kids the same way. And it just got to the point where I didn't really feel like how I felt was wrong. And Yeah. And I would go and I would talk to my parents about it, and they would tell me to stop listening to my friends, or people are getting in my head. And we would have these whole big arguments and these big eruptions about it. And I truly feel like I came out to my parents and to my family like 5 or 6 times throughout my life. And every single time I was kind of shoved back into the closet. And I had to fight and claw my way back out just to get thrown back. And I don't know, but I always had the feeling or the thought in my head, because me and my mother were really close, and me and my dad, we weren't as close, but you know, you know me, you see me, we hang out all the time. And I just had the feeling that whenever I found someone that I was truly in love with, and I could bring them and I could introduce them to my parents, and they would see that like, this is me for real, and we could stop fighting about it. And I don't know why I had that in my head. Well, I did. I had finally got to the point where after I graduated college, I lived life for a minute, and then I ended up meeting this boy that I did really like. And I took him to introduce him to my parents, and well, first I told them about him. And it wasn't received the best, but I kept trying. And I kept pushing, and I don't know. It just never went well. And that hurt. That sucked. Because I really thought that was gonna help or like change things. And in a lot of ways, it just kind of made it worse. So eventually that ended, and I went and I had a conversation with my parents after me and the guy broke up. And I was really sad. And I was at their house, and I would go and I would try to talk, and I felt like I was just getting kicked while I was down on more than one occasion. And then finally we had kind of a blow up moment where it felt like I was getting put in an intervention, and everybody in the room went around and told me how they felt about it, and how they felt about me. So even now, I still feel like I am in my coming out journey. But I'm more secure in who I am now, and I can't be put back into that closet. Because now I stand strong in myself. And that's why you only see my sister in my videos, because that's the only family that I still talk to, because of all of this. And yeah, so now I feel like my big coming out was back when I was 24, when I decided to like really go hard with the man that I loved. And now at 28, I proudly walk around in my truth, which I feel like I have been for years without really saying it. Because people knew. This was not a surprise. This was not a surprise for anybody. But I just wanted to share and also give you a little backstory, because when y'all met me in December, all of that had just happened. Or when did y'all meet me? Yeah, that first vlog that's in December. All of that had just happened. And this journey that I have been on has been me reclaiming myself And that's also where the name Totally Taurus comes from. Yeah. I just wanted to share my story because there are a lot more people that I have met that have had great instances when they come out to their family, and their family was very like open and accepting and like, I love you no matter what. But just as much as those stories are important, there's also another side of the coin, and everybody doesn't get that bright and warm welcome. And so, to people out there that may still be fighting, keep going. You're not in it alone, is basically what I wanted to say. So, happy Pride, and remember to be kind to each other, because you never know what people are feeling. If you made it this far, comment the gay flag emoji on the top, I guess. Or some sparkles. Whatever your heart desires. But thank you for watching along with me. And make sure to like the video, comment, share with people that you think would need it, and subscribe. And me and Milo will see you in the next one. Bye.